I've been holding on to this for a while, and honestly, I still get chills just thinking about how it all started. If you had told me 5 years ago that a misdirected text message would completely rewrite my entire life, I would have laughed in your face. Back then, I was just trying to keep my head above water. I was 34, living in a cramped apartment in Chicago, and running myself ragged trying to get my interior design business off the ground. My love life was a joke, and my daily highlight was literally just pouring a glass of Pinot Noir at 9 p.m. and scrolling through TikTok until my eyes blurred. Then, one rainy Tuesday night, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number with a Louisiana area code. The message read, "Hey kiddo, made it to the transit hub safely. Flight leaves for Poland in 3 hours. Don't forget to feed Buster, and tell your mom I love her. I'll call when we touch down." Clearly, it was a mistake. Some poor dad or soldier was trying to reach his family before deploying, and he'd gotten a digit wrong. My first instinct was to just ignore it. But something about the raw, quiet vulnerability of that text made me pause. I couldn't just leave him hanging, thinking his family got his goodbye. So, I typed back, "Hey there, I think you have the wrong number. But I hope you have a safe flight, and I'm sure your family loves you. Thank you for your service." I figured that would be the end of it. I locked my phone, set it on the nightstand, and went to sleep. But when I woke up the next morning, there was a reply waiting for me. Sent at 3:14 a.m. Well, that's embarrassing. Sorry to bother you, ma'am. And thank you. By the way, no wife or kids here, just a very confused sister who currently has no idea where her dog Buster is. I appreciate the kind words. Carter. I smiled at my phone, a little longer than I probably should have. There was something so incredibly charming and grounded about his tone. Before I could overthink it, I shot back a quick, playful reply. And just like that, a door opened that neither of us had any intention of closing. Over the next few weeks, Carter and I became this weird, beautiful constant in each other's lives. Because of the 6-hour time difference between Chicago and his base near the Ukrainian border in Poland, our communication rhythm was totally chaotic but somehow perfect. I'd wake up to these long, incredibly vivid texts describing the biting Polish cold, the smell of diesel and pine trees, and how much he missed real American drip coffee. In return, I'd send him pictures of my disastrous attempts at remodeling a local coffee shop or complain about the brutal Chicago wind. He was a chief warrant officer, flying Blackhawks. He was 38, possessed this incredibly dry, understated sense of humor, and had a way of looking at the world that made my chaotic life feel suddenly very grounded. We graduated from texts to voice memos. Hearing his voice for the first time was a moment. It was this deep, slow southern drawl, roughened by years of yelling over helicopter rotors, but it had this incredibly gentle, comforting warmth to it. I found myself keeping my AirPods in all day, just waiting for that little ping, walking around my apartment smiling like an idiot at my phone. My friends thought I was losing my mind. "You're falling for a guy you've never seen, who is literally in a military zone on the other side of the world," they'd say. And they weren't wrong. It was terrifying. I didn't even know what he looked like. We had intentionally kept it to just voice and text, almost like we were afraid that putting a face to the magic would break the spell. But then, about 2 months in, the tone of his messages changed. The playful banter faded into shorter, more exhausted updates. There was a quiet tension in his voice memos, a background noise of heavy machinery and distant, solemn voices. He couldn't tell me what was happening, operational security. But I could feel the weight of whatever he was carrying through the screen. I started falling asleep with my phone clutched in my hand, waking up at 3 a.m. just to check if the read receipt had popped up. And then, on a Thursday in late November, the messages stopped completely. First, it was 24 hours. I kept telling myself he was just out on a long mission, or the base Wi-Fi was down, or maybe his battery died. But then 24 hours turned into 3 days. Then a week. That week was hands down the longest, most agonizing 7 days of my life. I was going through the motions of my daily routine, meeting clients, picking out paint swatches, pretending to listen to my friends, but inside, I was absolutely spiraling. I had this constant, heavy pit in my stomach. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart would leap into my throat, only to sink when I saw it was just a spam email or a text from my mom. The hardest part was the realization of how powerless I actually was. If something had happened to him, who would tell me? I wasn't his wife. I wasn't his sister. I was just a random girl from Chicago who got a wrong number text. To the military, to the rest of the world, I didn't exist in his life. I had no right to information, no emergency contact privileges. I didn't even have his sister's phone number. I was completely in the dark, staring at a blank chat screen that felt like a black hole. I started obsessively checking the news, searching for any reports of helicopter accidents or military incidents near the Polish border. My search history was a terrifying mess. I barely slept, barely ate. I realized, with this sudden, terrifying clarity, that I had fallen completely, deeply in love with a man whose face I had never even seen. By the 10th day, I was starting to grieve. I thought, this is it. He's gone, and I'll never know what happened to him. Then, on the 12th night, around 2:15 a.m., my phone didn't just buzz. It rang. I scrambled across the bed, nearly knocking over my lamp, and grabbed the phone. It was an unrestricted number. I pressed answer so fast I almost dropped it, my voice barely a whisper. Hello? There was static on the line, the distant sound of beeping, and then a long, heavy exhale. Hey, Chicago, a voice rasped. It was him. But he sounded incredibly weak, his voice rough and laced with exhaustion and pain. Before I could even say his name, he cleared his throat and said, I'm sorry I went dark on you. Things got a little complicated out here. My heart stopped, then practically hammered against my ribs. Tears were already spilling down my face, but I forced my voice to stay steady. Carter? Oh my God, Carter. Are you okay? Where are you? I'm in a military hospital in Germany, he said, his voice quiet, almost a whisper. We had a hard landing during a night extraction. Bad weather, engine failure. I got banged up pretty good. Broken ribs, a shattered collarbone, and a pretty nasty concussion. They had me under for a couple of days. He coughed, and I could hear him wince through the line. The sound of his pain physically hurt me. I'm so sorry, Chicago, he murmured, his southern drawl dragging slightly from whatever pain meds they had him on. The first thing I thought of when I woke up was that you'd think I walked away. Or worse. I had to beg one of the night nurses to let me use her personal phone just to dial this number. I didn't even have my contacts, but I realized I'd memorized your number. I guess it's permanently burned into my brain. Hearing that, I completely lost it. I sat there in the dark of my bedroom, crying tears of sheer, overwhelming relief, laughing through the sobs. You idiot, I whispered, wiping my face with the sleeve of my sweater. You absolute idiot. You memorized my number? Every digit, he said, and I could hear the faint, weak smile in his voice. Kept me focused while they were pulling me out of the wreckage, honestly. Just repeating those 10 digits over and over. We talked for only 5 minutes before the nurse told him he had to hang up, but those 5 minutes changed everything. There was no more playing cool. No more pretending this was just some fun, casual distraction. 2 weeks later, he was cleared to be medically evacuated back to the States for his long-term rehab. He was going to Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio, Texas. The day before his flight, he sent me a text. For the first time in 3 months, it wasn't just words or a voice note. It was a photo. It was a selfie of him sitting in his hospital bed. He had a brutal scar running down his left temple, his shoulder was bound tightly in a massive black brace, and he looked incredibly pale and tired. But his eyes, this piercing, warm hazel, were looking right into the camera, and he had this incredibly genuine, lopsided smile. Underneath the picture, he wrote, "So, this is me. Still want to meet for that coffee?" My hands were shaking as I typed my reply. I didn't even hesitate. I booked a one-way flight to San Antonio for the following morning. The flight to San Antonio was a complete blur. I don't think I breathed the entire 3 hours. When I finally walked through the sliding glass doors of the hospital, the smell of antiseptic and cafeteria coffee hit me, and my knees went weak. I had this sudden, terrifying wave of imposter syndrome. What was I doing here? I was just a girl from a text message. But I took a deep breath, gripped my purse, and walked up to the 4th floor. When I found his room, the door was cracked open. I peeked in, and there he was, sitting up in his bed, looking out the window at the Texas sky. He looked so much smaller than he sounded on the phone, worn down by weeks of pain and surgeries, but the second he heard the door creak, he turned his head. Those hazel eyes locked onto mine. For a second, neither of us said a word. The silence in that room was so loud. Then, he smiled, that same lopsided, tired smile from the photo. And in that deep, slow southern drawl, he said, "You're even prettier than your voice, Chicago." I didn't care about the nurses, the 4 lines, or his broken collarbone. I crossed the room in 3 strides, sat carefully on the edge of his bed, and just held his hand. It was warm, calloused, and solid. When he wrapped his good arm around my shoulder and pulled me close, tucking his chin into my hair, I felt this overwhelming wave of peace. I was home. It was the easiest, most natural feeling in the world. That was 2 years ago. Today, we live in a little house just outside of San Antonio. Carter's collarbone healed, though he still grumbles when the weather changes, and he's transitioned to training new pilots instead of flying active deployments. He's currently sitting on our back porch, tossing a tennis ball to our golden retriever, whom we legally had to name Buster, of course. Sometimes, when we're sitting together on the couch, I'll look down at my phone and just laugh. If one digit had been different, if I'd been too busy to reply, or if he'd just deleted my text, I'd still be in that cramped Chicago apartment, wondering when my life was finally going to start. But universe had other plans. And honestly, I've never been so glad to get a wrong number in my entire life. You know, looking back on everything, I think this whole crazy journey taught me a really valuable lesson about life. Sometimes, we get so caught up in our rigid routines, protecting our peace, and filtering out the noise, that we close ourselves off to the unexpected. We ignore the wrong numbers. We delete the weird emails. We play it safe. But the absolute best, most life-altering things usually happen right outside of our comfort zones, hidden behind a mistake or a moment of pure chance. You just have to be willing to answer when the universe rings. I'm so incredibly grateful I answered that night. If you love this story and want to hear more wild, heartwarming, and completely unexpected real-life journeys like this one, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Trust me, we're just getting started, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. See you in the next video.